Howdy. I got tired of saying hello, so I decided to go with howdy. Thank you all for joining me. This is my podcast. If you hadn't figured that out by now, I'm not really sure why you're here, but I'm Brandon Cunningham, and I just like sharing the Word of God. I like sharing exactly what it says and then talking about it. I love studying the Hebrew language and Hebrew culture and learning about this people that God set apart and then made a way for us to join into their covenants with Him. So today we're in Exodus 32. This is a story most of us have heard at some point or another, but you probably don't realize how much it has to do with us and how these Hebrews were not much different than we are today. In fact, they really weren't different at all. It was pretty similar. So this is the golden calf incident. And we're going to read it today in the New Living Translation because I have, there's some things I know that are kind of hard to understand in the complete Jewish Bible. I get that. So we're going to read the New Living Translation today, and then we'll talk about it. So when the people saw how long it was taking Moses to come back down the mountain, they gathered around Aaron. Remember, he's still up there getting all of this from God. So, come on, they said, make us some gods who can lead us. We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses who brought us here from the land of Egypt. So Aaron said, take the gold rings from your ears of your wives and sons and daughters and bring them to me. All the people took the gold rings from their ears and brought them to Aaron. Remember, they got all this gold from the Egyptians when they left. Then Aaron took the gold, melted it down, and molded it into the shape of a calf. When the people saw it, they exclaimed, O Israel, these are the gods who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Aaron saw just how excited the people were, so he built an altar in front of the calf. Then he announced, tomorrow will be a festival to the Lord. The people got up early the next morning to sacrifice burnt offerings and peace offerings. After this, they celebrated with feasting and drinking, and they indulged in pagan revelry. The Lord told Moses, quick, go down the mountain. Your people whom you have brought from the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. How quickly they have turned away from the way I commanded them to live. They have melted down gold and made a calf, and they have bowed down and sacrificed to it. They are saying, these are your gods, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. When the Lord said, I have seen how stubborn and rebellious these people are. Now leave me alone so my fierce anger can blaze against them, and I will destroy them. Then I will make you, Moses, into a great nation. But Moses tried to pacify the Lord his God. O Lord, he said, why are you so angry with your own people whom you brought out from the land of Egypt with such great power and such a strong hand? Why let the Egyptians say their God rescued them with the evil intention of slaughtering them in the mountains and wiping them from the face of the earth? Turn away from your fierce anger. Change your mind about this terrible disaster you have threatened against your people. Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You bound yourself with an oath to them, saying, I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven, and I will give them all this land that I have promised to your descendants, and they will possess it forever. So the Lord changed his mind about the terrible disaster he had threatened to bring on his people. Then Moses turned and went down the mountain. Real quick, verse 14 says, Adonai then changed his mind about the disaster he had planned for the people. And that really shows the strength of Moses in his mediator role. He was able to speak to God in a way no one ever has before or since. But now Jesus Christ is in that role. So let's go. Then Moses turned and went down the mountain. He held in his hands the 2 stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant. They were inscribed on both sides, front and back. These tablets were God's work. The words written on them were written by God himself. When Joshua heard the boisterous noise of the people shouting below them, he exclaimed to Moses, it sounds like war in the camp. But Moses replied, no, it's not a shout of victory, nor the wailing of defeat. I hear the sound of celebration. When they came near the camp, Moses saw the calf and the dancing, and he burned with anger. He threw the stone tablets to the ground, smashing them at the foot of the mountain. You probably saw that in the movie. He took the calf they had made and burned it. Then he ground it into powder, threw it into the water, and forced the people to drink it. Finally, he turned to Aaron and demanded, "What did these people do to you to make you bring such terrible sin upon them?" "Don't get upset, my lord," Aaron replied. "You yourself know how evil these people are. They said to me, 'Make us gods who will lead us.' We don't know what happened to this fellow Moses who brought us here out of the land of Egypt. So I told them, 'Whoever has gold jewelry, take it off.' When they brought it to me, I simply threw it into the fire, and out came this calf." Anybody has kids, you've heard a story like this. Moses saw that Aaron had let the people get completely out of control, much to the amusement of their enemies. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and shouted, "All of you who are on the Lord's side, come here and join me." And all the Levites gathered around him. Moses told them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each of you take your swords and go back and forth from one end of the camp to the other. Kill everyone, even your brothers, friends, and neighbors." The Levites obeyed Moses' command, and about 3,000 people that day died. Then Moses told the Levites, "Today you have ordained yourselves for the service of the Lord, for you have obeyed him even though it meant killing your own sons and brothers. Today you have earned a blessing." The next day Moses said to the people, "You have committed a terrible sin, but I will go back up to the Lord on the mountain. Perhaps I will be able to obtain forgiveness for your sin." So Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Oh, what a terrible sin these people have committed. They have made gods of gold for themselves. But now, if you will only forgive their sin, but not erase my name from the record you have written." But the Lord replied to Moses, "No, I will erase the name of everyone who has sinned against me. Now go, lead the people to the place I told you about. Look, my angel will lead the way before you. And when I come to call the people to account, I will certainly hold them responsible for their sins." Then the Lord sent a great plague among the people because they had worshipped the calf Aaron had made. So basically, he's starting to call them the people, not my people anymore. So they've broken this covenant. So Israel was breaking the Mosaic covenant as it was being made, as Moses was getting it. They're down there at the bottom of the mountain doing the opposite of what this covenant is. So basically the translation here is, we know there's a God, we know he's loving and powerful, but we're anxious and we're scared, so we'll just take matters into our own hands. We do that all the time. Basically, we're impatient and afraid. The Israelites get the man that is supposed to be their high priest to lead this offense against God. They went to the pastor, so to speak, the senior pastor. And they would need a lot of earrings to do this. So this means a lot of people agreed with this. A lot of people participated in this. The people thought, though, they were honoring Yahweh. They thought they were honoring the God that brought them out. They were not trying to worship a pagan god or a false god. They thought what they were doing was right. And the reason they thought that is because they let their emotions, their fear, and their anxiety cloud what God had already told them. Because he had already told them, don't make things like this. You know, that second commandment is there. Do not make anything, and then you won't have to worry about worshiping it. You know, so the golden calf was common, in the Middle East. It was a sign of strength and authority. The Egyptians had the Apis bull, and it really makes you think. Maybe we should look at all of our icons. We may or may not worship it, we think, and we may or may not think of it in terms of a pagan god or an idol. But if God sees it that way, then our opinion doesn't matter at that point. We need to follow what he says. Because despite hearing Jehovah's own voice give them his 10 commandments, his 10 words, at the first sign of trouble, their instinct was not to believe God. I don't think God's in this. I don't think God can help me here. Worshipping other gods back in Egypt never helped them. They stayed slaves. They didn't make it out worshiping these other gods. We tend to fall back on what's comfortable. We just feel like this is what we should do. And that's why God says don't rely on your own understanding, because the way you feel is contrary a lot of times to what God wants. And we're not supposed to look back at what was comfortable and secure. You know, the only woman in the Bible that Jesus said, remember, was Lot's wife. When he said, when she looked back, she turned into a pillar of salt. He said, remember what she was doing and don't do that. Don't look back at what you thought was comfort. So we love the familiar, the things that validate our lifestyle. We'll compromise or rationalize God's principles if it satisfies our emotions. You know, when I gave the podcast about the commandments, and I heard from a few of you, but this makes me feel this way and this makes me feel that way, and I get it. But feelings and God's word are two different things. And if God said don't do it, how it makes you feel is not really important at all. So remember, it's the need for visible evidence of God's presence that's kind of driving all of this, because his presence is not significant in our heart and our mind. We need to visualize it sometimes. And God knows that we need that reassurance and evidence. I think it's every morning when the sun comes up and every evening when the sun sets. It's pretty obvious God's presence. But remember, he didn't need a tabernacle. He didn't need men to build it for him. He built it, and he had it built for Israel's sake, not for his own. He didn't need any of that stuff. The tabernacle was a physical demonstration of heavenly principles. The tabernacle was God ordained. He said, do it. He didn't ordain anything else. And remember too, that man will install the Antichrist to rule over us for the same reasons they made this golden calf: impatience, fear, anxiety, and the need for visible proof. It's not that we will install him as Antichrist. We'll think he's the right one, but he's not. So the world wants a golden calf. You know, we hear that all. We want to stop all the violence and terror in the world and everybody to be happy, but that's not the way. There's only one way, and that's through Jehovah God and his son, Yeshua the Messiah. So most of the world and all but a remnant of the church won't wait for God's solution. We'll take matters in our own hands, just like the Israelites did with the golden calf. God says what your people are doing. You know, he has been calling them my people. He actually disowned Israel. The covenant is broken. He's showing Moses that these people are his responsibility. And Moses hadn't really quite grasped the importance in Jehovah's eyes that he had, or of the people, how they looked at him. So he was humble, introverted, and had a hard time understanding why people would look at him as their leader. You know, most leaders feel that way. I don't know why these people are following me. I'm just called to do it. Other people, it's like, I'm good enough to do this. They should follow me. So when the people didn't see what they expected, they lost faith. The result was the golden calf. I've never made a good decision when I was in fear mode, which is why God reminds us so many times to fear not. You know, fear leads to poor judgment and irrational behavior almost every time. Moses throws the tablets. He had the calf ground into dust and made the people drink it. Whenever a covenant it was violated, the clay tablets it was written on were thrown down to signify that it's broken, that we'll tear up a contract, the same basic concept. This wasn't a moment of rage like in the movie. The people knew what this meant. This was, just like tearing up a contract. Everybody understood what it meant. It's better in the movie to say he was just angry, but whenever a covenant was violated and the tablets broken, then everyone knew this God that had brought them out of the land of Egypt, out of slavery, was no longer in a covenant with them. And they needed to do something about that. So Moses asked Aaron what happened. His answer was, they made me do it, peer pressure and social pressure. Then Moses called all those who stood with him. And he's doing what God has demonstrated throughout Genesis and Exodus and the whole Bible. He divides and separates to create unity. This principle that God divides really contradicts modern church doctrine that God is the great uniter. The unity at all costs doctrine, we should all just love each other and get along. God never says that, and that's not what he wants. He wants everybody to be unified in him, not in just theory or whatever. He separates and divides us to create unity. Not everybody gets to be part of his chosen people. That's why they're called chosen people. So his unity is a oneness with his spirit. So it was the Levites who stood with Moses, even though they really hadn't been created yet. That's who it ended up being. The priesthood has not really been established yet. So Moses was a Levite. Most people don't know that. And he was head of the Levite tribe, obviously, but the Levites killed 3,000 of the calf worshipers. They even killed fellow Levites. And because Moses says, by not even sparing your own sons and brothers, you've consecrated yourself to God. Given the choice between obeying Jehovah and executing your own child for idolatry, at his command, you choose obedience to God. I get it. I understand. But our duty is to God. It's not to our child. So that sets you apart. These Levites were divided away from the rest of Israel and consecrated to become God's priest. And that will happen as we move forward. In Genesis, we saw Jacob told Simeon and Levi, it was really Levi, but we changed it to Levi, but that violence would follow them. But he also told them something else. In Genesis 49, 5-7, it says this: Shimon and Levi were brothers, related by weapons of violence. Let me not enter their counsel. Let my honor not be connected with their people. For in their anger they killed men, and at their whim they maimed cattle. Cursed be their anger, for it has been fierce. I will divide them in Jacob, and I will scatter them in Israel. It was Levi and Shimon, Simeon, who led the raid on Shechem. Here the meaning of I will divide them in Jacob is explained. It comes to light in Exodus 32. The Levites are divided from the rest of Israel. Their violent natures are put to good use because they're going to be the ones he calls to kill the calf worshippers, and in some cases their own children. So the second part, where Levi will be scattered in Israel, happens when the land of Canaan gets divided up. The Levites were given 48 cities to live in. They didn't get their own land. They were given these cities within all the borders of the other tribes. They will deal with blood and killing on a daily basis. But this time it'll be sacrificial blood. They'll run the temple and the sacrificial system. Now, the killing that God calls for is not murder. He is able to do that. I mean, he's able to do anything he wants. But it would now be as God's servants that they'll be carrying out justified killing that brought justification and atonement before God on behalf of Israel. So Jehovah lays down the principle that a man is responsible for his own sins, and sin must be punished. There's no alternative to that. Now, these 3,000 were just the start. Those who participated in the calf worship suffered a plague and wiped out the rest of them. So the Mosaic covenant has been broken, and Israel's relationship with God is broken. He'll reestablish that covenant with Moses in Deuteronomy, which we will get to eventually. It's a great book too, so look forward to it. But when we say Old and New Covenant too, we act like there's only been two covenants ever. And God made the Mosaic covenant, then broke it, and then reestablished. He didn't break it, we broke it, but the Israelites broke it. But he reestablishes it, and it still stands to this day. So that's chapter 32 of Exodus. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, love God, love people, and change the world.